Welcome back. Well, in combating the spread of the coronavirus, countries around the world have been impacted financially. And for some countries in the Middle East, they're being forced to inject cash to keep their economies going. And over the weekend, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Egypt all announcing stimulus packages worth more than $46 billion to combat the economic effects of this pandemic. So CNN's John Defterios is based in the UAE and can help break down the numbers for us and the details. Good to see you, John. So we are seeing these stimulus packages now being rolled out throughout the Middle East. Just take us through the details and what impact they are hoping they will have.
Well, there are two forces or dual forces at play here, Lynda, and they both lead back to oil and forcing the hand, as you suggested in the lead-in here, by regional governments. Number one, we have a price war underway here between Saudi Arabia and Russia when it comes to oil supplies and oil prices hovering just over $30 a barrel. The second thing is that demand is collapsing for oil and gas because of the coronavirus. We had South Korea come out on Sunday saying their demand in the last month dropped by 10%. And it's a similar tale across all the major importers around the world, particularly in Asia, China, South Korea, and Japan. So let's take a look at what we've seen in the oil market. It's not just a bear market. If you look at the start of the year, we're down better than 50%. From the tensions that we had with Iran in early January down to the shock of the oversupply that we see now because of that price war I was talking about. And this is forcing the hand of some of the regional governments, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, all chipping in a total of $46 billion put on the table over the weekend. I think the most surprising element here is that the UAE put in the majority of the money. And that gives us an indication about the slowdown of tourism in the United Arab Emirates and also the shock during the reforms to the 2030 plan by Saudi Arabia, perhaps being slowed down because of the price of crude hovering over $30 a barrel. We have Sunday stock market trading as well. And despite the bailouts you see on the screen here, Dubai was down better than 3%. And Saudi Arabia down better than 1%, giving us an indication after that rally on Wall Street on Friday, expect more turbulence in Asia and other global markets on Monday.
Yeah, no doubt. And of course, much of Europe, especially Italy and France, rely so heavily on tourism for their economies. If those countries remain under lockdown for the foreseeable future, weeks going into months, what impact is that going to have?
You know, it's a trade-off between the health of society and the wealth of society at the same time. And that's what the governments are trying to balance, but they have to put the health of society first, Lynda. But it's interesting that France, Spain, and Italy are all extremely dependent on international visitors, and they rank very high. Let's take a look here. Number 1, 2, and 5 as global destinations. And as a benchmark, you usually see that tourism receipts make up 10% of the GDP of each country in terms of employment and total revenue that's coming in. So this will be a shock, not just domestically, but what we see now with the limitations on movement of people, but global receipts when people don't start traveling to these major destinations in the future. And this is hovering like a cloud over the equity markets, whether it's Asia, Europe, or the United States. We saw a huge rally on Wall Street, kind of a relief rally after the big sell-off we saw earlier in the week and the oil market crash. But the indications are for Dow futures and S&P 500 futures is a drop of 1 to 1.5% when the opening bell hits on Wall Street. It's also worth reminding our viewers, after that gain of 9% on Wall Street, we're hovering just around bear market territory of 19 to 20% losses in a month that we've seen on Wall Street because of concerns about the recession and all these measures that are being taking place in Europe as well.
Absolutely incredible. John Defterios, as always, good to have you staying across it all for us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, Iran is accused of doing too little too late to stop the novel coronavirus. How recommendations from health officials are interfering with tradition as communities bury their dead. Plus, we'll speak to perhaps the most important international body working to stem this outbreak. My conversation with a spokesman from the World Health Organization will be coming up at the top of the hour. Welcome back. I'm Lynda Kinkade. You are watching Connect the World. Good to have you with us. Well, the coronavirus has led to disruptive changes on a global scale. I want to go to O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. Take a look at these pictures. These are pictures of Americans returning from Europe, waiting for hours upon hours to go through customs and then through health screenings. And as you can see, passengers there pretty much elbow to elbow. No social distancing to speak of. Well, Europe also is taking drastic measures. France is closing on non-essential businesses like restaurants, and people in Spain are being ordered to stay home. Easter events also at the Vatican have now been cancelled. Well, the reason for the urgency is clear in the numbers. According to Johns Hopkins, more than 150,000 people have now been infected, and the virus has claimed more than 5,000 lives. Well, the White House says President Trump has tested negative for the coronavirus. And this comes after a surprise announcement from the president that he took the test on Friday. He recently came into contact with two people who had tested positive for the virus. Sarah Westwood joins us now from the White House. And Sarah, we saw the president give a press conference 2 days ago where he was shaking everyone's hand and touching the microphone, and he was criticized for that. He seemed to be a little bit more subdued yesterday after taking that coronavirus test. Do you think he's taking this pandemic a little bit more seriously?
Certainly the people around him are, Lynda, and the president has now had his own personal brushes with coronavirus. As you mentioned, he interacted with people who subsequently tested positive for COVID-19, and he himself has now undergone a test. That testing has been the focus of his administration's efforts right now. And we've seen President Trump gradually shift his tone to be more serious about it, but now you're also seeing the White House take some more precautions. Yesterday, before that briefing where President Trump revealed that he had been tested, reporters were actually they had their temperatures taken before they were allowed into the briefing room. So that just gives you a sense of how cautious White House officials are being now with the people who are in the same room as President Trump. And you're right that Trump has been criticized by observers for not practicing the kind of social distancing measures that his own administration has been advising people to take.
All right, Sarah Westwood at the White House. We'll have to leave it there for now, but good to have you with us as always. Thank you. Welcome back. I'm Lynda Kinkade. We're going to return to our top story now. As we mentioned, the novel coronavirus pandemic is prompting Egypt, the UAE and Saudi Arabia to pledge $46 billion to help the economic impact in the region. Our Sam Kiley is in the region. He joins us now from Abu Dhabi. Sam, good to have you with us. So I want to start first on Egypt because we are seeing numbers there increase, over 100 cases, 2 deaths. They are now shutting down universities there. You spoke to the World Health Organization representative in Egypt. What did they have to say?
Well, very interestingly, Lynda, the regional head or the local head of the WHO, Jean Jabour, said that Egypt was doing pretty well. And that's on the back of a lot of social media criticism within Egypt of the Egyptian authorities, because there is deep distrust of the authoritarian regime that rules that country to deal with this sort of event. But as far as the WHO is concerned, that 110 figure for the numbers of infections sounds credible. This is what he told me.
We can say, and very well guided by the World Health Organization, they practiced well in order to contain the clusters from the beginning of from the occurrence or the infection of or the occurrence of symptoms in tourists, and then tracing the contacts and then controlling within the community in order not to spread on a wider scale in the community.
Now, the spread on a wider scale is the key issue, and that, of course, is something that has been highly problematic in terms of Iran, because Iran has been traced as not the source, that was China, of course, but an onward exporting nation for the early stages of this virus. And the high death toll there, 113 in the last 24 hours, Lynda. 14,000 people officially infected there, but experts at the University of Toronto believe that figure may be out by a factor of some 4 times, some 400%. And there is mounting evidence that this may be true. Here's our report. Images of tragedy visible from space. Mass graves, believed to be for coronavirus victims in the Iranian holy city of Qum, revealed by a satellite. The pit, about 100 yards long. A source who has witnessed the process tells CNN that they are dug especially deep and away from other graves. The work is done at night. Piles of white powder can be seen, most likely quicklime, used on victims to sterilize their remains. The government's official infection rate in Iran is now over 10,000, with more than 450 dead. The figures climb daily, but may be a catastrophic underestimate.
What we found was that at the time that we did this initial estimate, Iran was reporting less than 50 cases. And based on our best estimates, we were estimating something around 18 to 20,000 cases. So basically 400-fold more cases than the official estimates would suggest.
That was last month. Today, the experts say the real number of Iranian infections is likely in the hundreds of thousands. Iranian officials have admitted that separate treatment needed for corona victims' bodies was causing backlogs in mortuaries in Qom. Iran is mobilizing against the virus. The cabinet now meets in masks, its president sounding hopeful.
Dear and honorable people of our country, we are having a difficult time, but we will leave these days behind us.
Iran has been accused of doing too little too late to disinfect its streets and isolate the population, a warning to other nations as the pandemic spreads. These images of suspected mass graves in Iran, perhaps a worst-case example, or a glimpse into the near future. Now, Lynda, I think what all of this shows us is that assumptions about relative levels of economic development in different countries, in that the poor would be less able to deal with these issues, is not borne out by reality. The difficulties in the Anglo-Saxon world, United States, United Kingdom, highly problematic responses, a lot of criticism there, and yet a poor, impoverished country like Egypt, the World Health Organization saying doing pretty well. And of course, Iran has a very unique set of problems, Lynda.
Sam Kiley for us in Abu Dhabi. Thanks so much for staying across it all in the region. We will speak to you again soon. Well, still to come here on Connect the World, it is important to remember in anxious times like these, there are also moments of joy. These are Italians in lockdown, keeping each other company, singing, dancing, playing music from their balconies while in self-isolation. That story coming up later on Connect the World.